Divorce is one of the most challenging transitions in life, and without the right guidance, it can quickly turn into a disaster. Welcome to Dodging Divorce Disasters, the show that helps you navigate the legal, financial, and emotional pitfalls of divorce before they happen. Each episode, we sit down with top professionals in the divorce community to hear real-life war stories, cautionary tales from the trenches of divorce. But we won't just leave you with the horror stories. Our experts will break down exactly what went wrong and, more importantly, how you can avoid making the same mistakes. Whether you're in the early stages of separation, deep in the process, or supporting someone through it, we're here to help you move forward with clarity, confidence, and fewer regrets. We're your hosts, Lori Hawkins and Pam Abarashed. We are local experts in the areas of real estate and lending, and we're so excited to be sharing these incredible professionals with you. Let's dive in.
We are here today with James Traub, and I am so excited you're here with us, James. Thank you so much for being on here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, let me think back. We were connected by a family law attorney that knew me and connected you. That's right. I couldn't remember. So you work a lot with family law attorneys too, right?
I do, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. What kind of brought you to become a divorce coach and that kind of thing? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. And, I've got a little bit of an interesting background here. I was a chemist before becoming a divorce coach, and so that's not a likely background here. And I came into this line of work because I, at the time, really wanted to work with men. And I saw that in men's groups and men's retreats, one of the biggest issues that was bringing men forward was some sort of a breakup or divorce, right? And there were a lot of men that were feeling really shattered. And there was an opportunity to help them. And so I very naively typed into Google a search, North Carolina, Charlotte, men divorce coaching, not even knowing that divorce coaching was a thing. I was a certified health and well-being coach at the time. And lo and behold, there was a whole area of study around helping people to navigate divorce and to get delivered on the backside of this, oftentimes meat grinder process in much better shape. And so that was really kind of where the inspiration came from. And then my background in quality assurance, working there for 15 years, my whole career had been like, how do you create a process that delivers consistently good outcomes? And here, as I learned more and more about divorce, it seemed like there was a process that was consistently delivering bad outcomes. And so I got really interested in understanding, well, what is it that's going on that so many people almost universally across the board are having a terrible experience of this? And part of it is that divorce is really challenging. So many parts of your life are getting turned upside down. There's been conflict that you haven't been able to resolve, but there's also a lot that's going on that makes it a really challenging process to get through in ways that it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I say all the time that it takes a team, and it really does. I mean, to get somebody through divorce, I wish I had had that team because I didn't when I went through my own personal divorce. And so yeah, I'm like you. I was a realtor, but then when I decided to kind of niche down into divorce, there was a whole world of experts in divorce that I didn't even know existed, one being a divorce coach. So I think that's great.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the challenges of divorce is that so many people come into this situation already feeling overwhelmed. Things have been challenging at home. Things are probably challenging with the kids and thinking about your future, and you're thinking about money, and you're thinking about the costs, and you're thinking about all of these things that are happening to you at the same time that now you're thrust into a process that you've never gone through before, right? And people are oftentimes looking for a life raft and they want to keep it as simple as possible. And so that will oftentimes lead them to an attorney, but they may miss seeing that there is a whole team of professionals that are really here to help guide people through divorce and make better decisions. And I can understand the challenge here of already feeling overwhelmed. And if someone's like, well, you might want to look into hiring a divorce coach and maybe talking to a financial professional and talking to someone about your mortgage and talking to someone about your house and maybe someone about insurance, like that is just adding overwhelm to overwhelm.
Right.
And it doesn't all need to happen at once, I think is one of the keys, right? Is there is a team and there will be a good time to involve different professionals. But if you don't know that these professionals exist, and you don't have someone in your corner who can help to connect you to the right professional at the right time for the right reason, you may find that you just spend a lot of money with your attorney and don't necessarily get all of the support that you need as a human being navigating a challenging process to get through it and deliver it on the other side. And that's one of the things that a divorce coach does, is they can help to air traffic control, help to educate you on what your options are, help to organize your questions and concerns so that you can talk to a mortgage specialist or a real estate specialist or even your attorney and be very organized about what your concerns and what your questions are, and to just make this process feel a little bit more doable and structured.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told you this when we met that you have totally changed the way that I think about divorce coaching. Because there are all kinds of coaching certifications, and there's life coaches and health and wellness coaches and sports coaches too, but there's all these different segments of coaching, and the way that you run your business and help people navigate divorce is just, I think, so unique and good. And I'm really excited for our listeners to hear more about you so that they can potentially work with you, because I think you are a very invaluable asset, to anybody going through a divorce, whether it's men or women. But you will help them tremendously with the emotional side of things. So I'm excited for you to be here.
I agree.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I think divorce coaching is still relatively new. And so a
Hmm.
lot of people have this question of like, what is a divorce coach? What do you do? Like, why would I spend even more money for this? How does this benefit me? And even a lot of attorneys still aren't entirely sure how to use a divorce coach. And so there's the whole like how to get divorced, right? There's a real legal and financial process that needs to be navigated. There's conversations that need to be had, decisions that need to be made. And on the flip side is that there's a human being going through this process, right? So how do you keep yourself together? How do you stay organized? How do you get clear on what it is that you want? How do you decide who the right professional for you to work with is? Right? An attorney that was great for your best friend is maybe not necessarily the right attorney for you, even though they had a great experience. So, a
Yeah.
big part of this is helping people to get really clear and then also to feel more confident engaging in the process. Because I see one thing that I see happen a lot is that people are going to professionals because they feel insecure, right? They're not necessarily confident in engaging their spouse because there's been so much conflict. So they end up putting other professionals in between them and their spouse, and that starts to take their divorce in a particular direction. And this is oftentimes people who don't want to spend a lot of money. They don't want to nuke the relationships. They want to come out whole on the other side. And so they make this big mistake of starting to work with professionals whose interests aren't really aligned with their own. Right. And that's one of the big reasons I see that divorce is so challenging for people. And they get to the end and it's just, they say this was a nightmare.
Working with the family law community, I have so much respect for them, but they will be the first to tell you that they don't know everything about everything. I mean, even introducing myself as a certified divorce real estate expert, they had never heard of that before, didn't know I exist. The same thing with Pam, a certified divorce lending professional. It's just them learning about all of our expertise and them seeing the value because they do not know these areas. And so
Hmm.
they appreciate us, I believe, after they recognize our value, but it just takes a while, it just takes a while. And like I said, I think they're the first to admit this. So,
Yeah. And there's little nooks and crannies where I think our specialties, can really help the entire process. At the event that you and I were at, just this past week, talking with mediators and collaborative attorneys very specifically, they've all got a challenge of one spouse thinks that this is a great idea. I would prefer to mediate or to go the collaborative route rather than get tangled up in the courts. Well, how do I engage my other spouse to think that this is also a good idea? Right? And attorneys don't have a huge tool set for helping someone to navigate those sensitive conversations with a spouse, right? There may be a fair amount of talking and strategizing and building someone up to prepare for those conversations. It ultimately benefits the attorneys, right? Because people are moving into a more amicable process and they're more clear on what they want. But they can't necessarily do that work themselves. It's not what the charge of an attorney is to think about how to strategize and have these
mhm.
conversations with your spouse.
Yeah, I agree. Um, so we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of why we're here in just a second, but we do like to talk about a fun fact before we get into all of that. So, you mentioned earlier that you were a chemist, and we also happen to know that you grew up in Hawaii, which is pretty cool. I think most people go to Hawaii, they don't come back to the US.
I
They-
know. What are you doing here?
So tell us about your previous life as a chemist and what you did, and then if you want to talk about Hawaii too, I'm sure we would love to hear about that.
For sure. And they're actually kind of intimately intertwined. We moved to Hawaii when I was 3, and I spent my entire childhood there through high school. And we moved there in large part because my dad was a naturopathic physician. And so he was looking for a place to start a holistic medical practice. And Hawaii is just very holistic in general. People are much more attuned to nature and they're more open to plant medicines and alternative forms of healing. So I grew up not only in Hawaii with that influence, but also in a household with my dad, right, who was basically a natural medical doctor. And so when I graduated with a degree in chemistry, it was pretty logical that I was going to go into the herbal medicine and dietary supplement industry. So I spent 15 years there working to make the products that you would buy in the supplement aisle at a Whole Foods or some other natural grocer. And that was a wonderful experience. And one of those companies in particular that's very fond in my memory was co-located on a 200-acre medicinal herb farm. So truly, we were growing the plants, testing the plants in the field, harvesting them, drying them, and then turning them into the products that would then go to Whole Foods. And just watching that entire process from seed to shelf was phenomenal.
Hmm. That's pretty wild. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine growing up. I've never even been to Hawaii, but I can't imagine, and I can't imagine growing up there. That must have been a great
It
childhood.
was, and like all children, I took it for granted. It
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter where you grow up. You get to high school and you're like, I'm ready to blow this popsicle stand,
Mhm.
Show me malls, show me road trips. I've heard about these things, but I've never
Yeah.
experienced them. So it's not until moving away that you start to look back and really have that appreciation for what you had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we kind of always like to talk about, and we ask you beforehand, just like with me being a realtor, and I have kind of niched myself down to the divorce area of real estate. You liked helping your parents navigate the early stages of divorce, right? That's
Mhm.
kind of, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So, in my opinion, the decisions that are made at the earliest stages of divorce are largely setting the direction for everything that comes afterwards. So everything from the decision and the discussion to divorce and how that's handled, how people tell their kids, whether papers get served, who hires an attorney, the type of attorney, like a lot of these decisions that get made in the first 30 to 60 days of deciding to divorce are setting the trajectory for the whole divorce journey. And so it's really challenging to come in the middle when people have already made a bunch of decisions and now are kind of unhappy with the process and want something different. It can be difficult to change, right? Because communication may have broken down, there may be a large outside influence on negotiations. So my desire is to really get up front of all of that when people are considering divorce, right? The whole should I stay or should I go decision, or if they've made internally a decision but they're scared to tell their spouse or they're not sure what those next steps are, to get involved, to educate, to help them get really clear on where they want to be when they come out of this process, and then talk again about the whole team. What are the resources and the expertise that you're going to need to be able to create this sort of process and to be the leader of your divorce? Because many people end up falling out of the driver's seat. If their spouse hires an attorney first or hires a particular type of attorney, right? Oftentimes they start to respond in kind, and this may not be at all what they wanted for their divorce. So I really like those early stages because that's where there's the greatest opportunity to influence how the whole thing is going to go.
I,
And the parents aspect of that too is just when you have kids, you've got a vested interest in having a better outcome. Not to
right.
say that all people without kids, don't want an amicable divorce, but your kids are going to continue to be influenced by
Mhm.
everything that happens now and everything that happens later. And so it really does everyone a large service to think about how to achieve an amicable outcome. Many people think it's beyond reach, right? If we could be in the same room, if we could talk through our problems, right? If we could compromise, then we wouldn't be getting divorced. And so they think, amicable's off the table, but it's not. You just need the right type of support.
Yeah, I think you brought up a great point too that you said something along the lines of like, oh, because one spouse hired a certain type of attorney, then you feel like you have to. A lot of times, I think we've probably all seen at least one couple where somebody wanted a collaborative divorce or an amicable divorce, and then their spouse hired a litigation attorney. And so they felt like they had to get a bulldog, right? Everybody's like, oh, I need a bulldog because my spouse has a bulldog. And I think having you as their the angel and the devil on their shoulder, to help them navigate. Why do you feel like you need a litigation attorney? And maybe you can convince your spouse to go collaborative before going that route, because sometimes people don't know that there's a difference between litigation and collaborative and just going to mediation and stuff like that. So that's a huge value add, using you, because you can be that quarterback and that voice of reason when they're just like reaction mode, right?
For
Hmm.
sure. And just because some of those initial decisions were made doesn't mean you can't change trajectory if you decide that you want to do something
Right.
different. So
Hmm.
even if your spouse hired an attorney or a particular type of attorney, they may have in their head that this is going to play out a
Mhm.
certain way, and that the way that they think it's going to play out may be pretty divorced from reality,
Yeah.
right? And so oftentimes there's an opportunity for my clients to educate their own spouse of, if we go this route, here's what's likely to happen. Are you sure you want that? And to
Mhm.
even encourage an opportunity to reconsider and to reevaluate what their options are.
Right. I think Pam and I say a lot, and you hit on this too. Even with us, and I know even particularly more with you, but getting us in early is the best thing you can do, even for the house, for the mortgage. And
Hmm.
I can see particularly, like I said, with you, but it really is important. But I feel like when you're okay, and I'm talking from experience here, when you're going through a divorce, denial, putting things off is just easier. You're coping with so many things that I think there's very few people that are like on top of it, you know? I feel
Hmm.
like most of us are kind of so overwhelmed that we just keep pushing things off. So that's good advice to kind of, try to get in early with all of us, to be honest.
Well, and that's a natural response to fear and uncertainty is to avoid it, right? If it's
Hmm.
not so urgent that we have to turn around and face it, then it can be more comfortable to kind of avoid it. But it doesn't mean that we're at ease or at peace with
Oh
things.
no.
And people oftentimes have really big questions about their living situation and the house. And will I get the house? And can I afford the house? Should I keep the house? If I don't have it, if we have to sell it, then where am I going to end up? And those fears will permeate the entire process too, right? And one of the things I've seen is that if people don't know that they're going to be okay, or if they don't know that they're going to have enough, they're going to continually want more. And so that, has implications for negotiations where if someone hasn't actually talked to a lending professional or a financial professional or a real estate professional to say, look, these are my concerns and questions. Can you help me to answer them? And to get to a place where now I actually understand what I'm likely moving towards and I hold on to that fear, I'm going to want as much as I can get. And it
Right.
may be enough, and I might still be, clamoring for more. And that can just really take negotiation sideways in a way that's very unnecessary.
I agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of things going sideways, um, we want to hear your craziest divorce disaster story. So if you could share that with us, and then also give some of your, 2 cents on how people could potentially avoid that same disaster for themselves.
For sure. So there's a client that I have in mind, and this kind of like goes back to wanting to get involved early in terms of a process. But this is a couple, they were in their 70s, getting divorced in a relatively straightforward divorce, right? One property, one marital home, a pension, a couple of retirement accounts. You would think that this might be a candidate for a divorce that could be done really simply, really affordably, get to the other side without a whole lot of to do. And yet I've watched this divorce unfold in a way that was very painful for my client. And it started with an early hiring of an attorney because communication had broken down between the parties and they wanted someone to insulate themselves from one another, her spouse in particular. And neither one of them really wanted to pull their money out and light it on fire. But I've watched as the attorney bills went up and up and up, right? And ultimately, a divorce that I think if these clients had been empowered to stay in conversation with one another and to work with a CDFA, a certified divorce financial analyst, to really just organize the house and the assets. There were no debts even, right? And to be able to come to an agreement on how they would part ways, they probably could have done this for like $4,000 to $6,000. And
Mm.
yet I've watched them spend $30,000 on attorneys and still head into a day of mediation with two attorneys and a retired judge for another $11,000.
Oh my
And so
God.
this is a divorce where people are beyond their working years, right? So every dollar is very meaningful. And there's no opportunity to really replenish these funds. And simply because the communication had broken down, more than $40,000 got spent navigating this divorce over
Wow.
a long period of time, right? And the relationship has soured along the way too, where it's like, I'm just ready to be done with you,
Hmm.
right? This felt so
Hmm.
unnecessary. We didn't need to do this. And so there's a financial cost, but there's also a tremendous emotional cost.
Right.
And they've got four grown children too. So, you can just see this is one of those examples where divorce doesn't necessarily have to be as challenging as it is. But because people weren't empowered to stay in conversation with one another and things kind of got out of their hands, a lot of money got spent. And the outcome, in my opinion, is not what it could have been with more support.
Mm. Wow.
That's a really great example. Because yeah, there's very simple estates, and sometimes it can be overcomplicated if the right people are not involved. So having somebody again to be your quarterback or the angel and devil on your shoulder or
Hmm.
however you want to, explain that, having somebody who can be there as a resource and again the voice of reason is priceless.
Yeah.
And I feel like um that's such a good example of how we let our emotions take control of the
Yes.
situation. You are not in a rational thinking position when you're going through all of this. So, uh, you know, yeah, you're just not.
Yeah.
Um, Something I do want to ask you when before I met you and other divorce coaches,
Hmm.
um, I immediately thought you were a waste of money because what did you bring to the table that, somebody else didn't? Now I
Tell us
know
how you really
different.
feel.
I
She's correct.
straight
Yes.
from the hip. Um, but I did because I didn't understand what you did.
Yeah.
Okay. But something I think people confuse because I confuse too is a divorce coach versus a therapist.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that people think they're intertwined and you aren't.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit?
For sure. I talk a lot about how coaching is future focused. And this isn't my own personal perception. I mean, coaching is inherently future focused. So the whole framework, whether it's divorce coaching or career coaching or life coaching or relationship coaching, is where are you today? Where are you trying to get tomorrow? What's getting in the way? And how are we going to come up with a plan to help you navigate around those obstacles and get to where you want to get to? So, in the context of divorce, it really frames out, okay, where are you in the process today? You're wanting to get to the end of this divorce process. What do you want that to look like? And then what are the obstacles? What's getting in the way of realizing this sort of an outcome that you want? So, divorce coaching is very tactical and it's very strategic. It's very future focused about what needs to be done. How do you need to show up? How do you need to get organized? What questions do you have? Who do you need to work with? What comes first? What comes second? What comes third? When there's setbacks, how are you going to respond to this? And it's all in the context of what you're trying to achieve, which for many of the clients that I work with is an amicable divorce that's, relatively affordable and doesn't set a bunch of money on fire. Therapists are also very valuable, but I think therapists are usually helping people in the present to show up in life in a way that is more effective, more productive, and feels better. And there's
Mhm.
oftentimes a look into the past to understand, well, what has gone on in the past that's impacting you in the present? And there is overlap here because coaches work in the present with where you are today and where you're going, and therapists also work in the present with what's going on. And for me, like there are times when I refer clients to therapy, right? If there's been issues of abuse, if there's been an affair, if there's issues of addiction, or if you can tell that there's some sort of like a trauma response where someone just can't let something go, or the response that they have is so outsized in comparison to the actual event that occurred, that can get in the way of envisioning the future. It can get in the way of engaging in conversations about what needs to happen next. It can prevent people from even being able to focus and get organized to do the work that they need to do. And so that's one of the ways that, we are different, but we're also complementary. If someone can't engage and move forward in the coaching process, there's oftentimes a need for therapeutic support to
Hmm.
figure out what's coming up and what's getting in the way. And then to attend to some of that so that you can then re-engage with the process.
Yeah.
And the
I
flip
like.
side too is that a therapist isn't really going to help you to envision your divorce, where you want to end up on the back end, and then talk to you day by day, week by week, month by month about the interactions with your spouse and how you're working with your attorney and who else you need to get connected with. They're very different domains of work.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Well, to piggyback onto that question, like part B, what practical advice do you give for someone who is, starting out in a divorce? I mean, what would you tell someone that was coming to you for the first time for a consultation or, was calling you? What would you get? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it comes down to working with professionals whose interests align with yours. You really want that alignment. You want people that feel like they are in your corner and they're helping to keep you in the driver's seat and help you to achieve the type of divorce that you want. However, to do that, you have to know what your interests are. So that is the first step for me is to help people to really envision like what is this divorce for and where do you want to end up when this is all said and done? Right? Because you got to get really crystal clear on that. And it's challenging. When your world's falling apart, it's not an easy question to ask someone to say, where do you want to be in a year when this is all said and done? Where do you want to be in 3 years and 5 years? Your career, your co-parenting, your lifestyle. Those are really, really challenging questions. But working with a coach, people can talk about what they don't want. That's usually pretty easy. I don't want more of what I just came out of. And we can listen into that, perceptively and listen for what people are actually wanting, even though they're talking about what they don't want. And so that's where a coach provides a lot of value is that you may not know what you want, but if you talk enough, we're going to be able to suss that out for you and give it back to you and say, does this sound right? Right? This
Mhm.
is kind of what we're hearing. From there, then everything starts to become more clear. Do you need to start talking about finances? Do you need to talk about the house? Do you need to get your legal questions answered? And now suddenly you've got a game plan.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense.
What questions should somebody ask a divorce coach if they're, shopping around or considering hiring one?
That's a great question. Um, I think fit is really important. With all of these professionals, like we could talk about credentials, we could talk about, their performance in the courtroom or what they've done for other people, but this is a very vulnerable process. And so I think a lot of it initially comes down to how do you feel around this person? Is this an individual that helps you to lower the stress level, to lower the temperature? Are you able to feel more grounded and centered when you're around this person? Because there's a lot of business of divorce. There's papers and things to sign and things to read. And if this person doesn't help to calm you down and give you a sense of clarity, then the relationship is missing something really important. So I would say, check for that first. How does it feel to just even be in a conversation with this person? And then two, how well do they seem to understand what it is that you're wanting to accomplish? And what ideas do they have for empowering you to accomplish that? So is this a person who's going to empower you or say, well, yeah, I'm just going to go and do that for you, which is might sound nice, it might sound convenient, but it's ultimately disempowering when someone else says, I'm going to go and do this for you.
Yeah.
So again, for someone who wants an amicable divorce, like you got to be involved because you got to be part and parcel to those conversations. So if anyone's listening and they want an amicable divorce and they're talking to a divorce coach or any other professional, make sure that they're in a position to support you with continuing to lead the process and not offering to take the wheel away from you and drive.
Good
Yeah,
advice.
teach a man to fish, he eats for life, or what is it? catch a fish for a man and feed him for a day, or teach him how to fish and feed him for life. It's the same kind of
Yeah,
thing. If you have
exactly.
somebody who's
Exactly.
empowering you, teaching you to fish,
Hmm.
I think that goes beyond just the divorce process. There's so many people who like, especially with finances, I'll talk to a lot of women and their husbands have handled the finances forever,
Hmm.
and they'll literally say to me, "Well, I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing, or I can't do this, or oh, I've never bought a house on my own before." And I'm like, "Well, you've never bought a house on your own before, but you have bought a house before, and you can do this. You've done it before. And
Yeah.
so I think having somebody there to give them that empowerment, or like, you can do this. I'm
Encouragement.
going to teach you
Yeah.
how instead of doing it for you, is huge. I love
I'm
that.
glad you brought that up because I see that a lot. I see people find their voice, right? They may
Hmm.
have to establish boundaries that they've been uncomfortable setting before. They may have to assert their needs and desires, which is something they may not have done before. Like you said, they may have to dig into the finances and get educated in a way that they've never done before. And you can look at that and say, well, this is unfortunate. I never had to do that before. Look at all the work that I'm doing now. But I see that many people, it develops their sense of self-efficacy and confidence when they start to do this and go, holy crap, like I can actually make things happen for myself.
Yeah.
And, what a silver lining to come out of this divorce process that is so largely negative. But if you can come out of it feeling empowered, what a tailwind that is moving into your next chapter.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, where can our listeners find you if they want to connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is bestpossibledivorce.com. If you go there, you can set up a free consultation with me, and then I'm also active on LinkedIn. So if you just search for James Traub, you'll see me in the search results there.
Awesome. And we'll put your information on the video for those who are watching. Thank you so much for joining us. We've loved chatting with you, and appreciate you giving us some time to be on here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
so
me.
much.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Information contained herein is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, please seek an attorney.